What's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a hell of a weekend for me. I've spent most of it playing Horizon Forbidden West. I think I just passed 20 hours on the game, and I'm still very much just in the one upper quadrant of the map. So the first thing that I can say about this game that is just ridiculous is the size and the scope of it. That's why I decided to release a short video here just discussing my initial impressions of the game. Definitely not a final score or a view or a overall impressions of the game at all, although I can tell you that for all of those things, this game is clocking extremely high for me. I've been having a hell of a lot of good times playing it. Of course, I streamed it for most of Friday. That's a reminder, by the way, keep an eye out for streams this week featuring this game and some of the other content that I'm playing, as well as some videos and builds and all of that coming down the line for it. So that content is all coming for Horizon Forbidden West. But let's just talk about the things initially that I really like about the game. Now, first and foremost, obviously the scope of the game is insane. So we have just more of everything that you probably enjoyed in the first game. So if you're a huge fan like me of Horizon Zero Dawn, and let's say you were a big fan of the mech designs and the enemies that you would face, there's just way more of that in this game. Of course, the graphic fidelity is through the roof, and this is one of the best looking games that I've seen in next gen yet. Definitely a system seller in my opinion. Even though I've only spent 20 hours with the game, and I can easily imagine myself going up to 100, especially if they release New Game Plus down the line, which I'm sure they'll do. So definitely it's hitting on all of those aspects. But the other thing that I'm also just really enjoying is the further on sort of expansion of the game in terms of like the talent trees. So you have 6 talent trees now, which really allow you to play the game the way that you want to. So if you heavily want to spec into traps and just essentially set up these ambushes for the enemies that you fight, that is absolutely something that you can do. On a side note, what's very interesting is if you actually fight against humanoid enemies and you put down traps, the AI is smart enough to try and figure those traps out, and they'll actually shoot traps and things like that to trigger them and to get them to not hit them, which is a fantastic addition to the AI. But then on the other side of that, if you want to go in as a brawler and melee everything with the spear, that's an option to you as well. So I think this is by far the best way that they could have gone with this. Originally I thought that maybe with the talent trees there was like too much filler, and it's just going to be a bunch of nodes that you pick. It's going to be like plus 15% damage plus this and everything like that. At least diving very deep into 2 of the 6 trees already, namely the range combat tree, well, let's say the close range combat tree, and the melee tree, I can tell you that that's not really the case, because you really, even though you have these insanely big talent trees, there's not like a lot of wasted space there, if I can put it that way, which is sometimes of concern when it comes to this. So then the last thing that I'm also just want to sort of point out is that overall the presentation of the story is pretty much on par with what we saw in the first game, in a way maybe even better. Definitely, I mean the voice acting and all of that is top notch, as it was in the first game. So honestly, they set the bar very high with that first game. Guerrilla really knocked it out of the park in my opinion. So it's invigorating to play this and to not feel let down even in the slightest yet. Now, of course, I am this kind of person that I don't just heap praise onto something. There are, of course, some things which are concerning to me, or in a way, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily negative things that take my overall enjoyment of the game away. But it is obviously stuff that I also brought up in the stream, and that's the fact that you still have this real focus on crafting ammunition within a fight. Now, I remember with the first game that this later on wasn't that much of a issue, because the thing is, after you had upgraded all your pouches and everything like that, you'd carry so much ammo with you into fights that you wouldn't necessarily have to do this. You could basically craft up ahead of a big fight, and then you'll be good for the duration of the fight. Now, of course, because you're starting this game out with no pouches fully, and being able to carry like 15 or 20 arrows into a fight at a time, you have this issue where you have to mid-combat kind of, craft ammunition and all of that. And that to me seems like I think the game should allow you to that later on, like let's say for instance when you get to, and I don't know if this is a thing, of course I haven't experienced the late game, so I'd very much come back to this clip and say, you know what, Full Measure, you're talking shit, like that sorted itself out. But it would be cool if like later on with like the best pouches and stuff like that, you could have some kind of like auto crafting system in the background happening that like slowly sort of auto refills your pouches with ammunition. Maybe that could have been in one of the talent trees. You know, this is me literally sitting here trying to nitpick things, because in the end, the combat and the combat loop in this game is so fun that, you know, to quickly just have to craft some, and I mean the crafting of the items is incredibly fast, and you can actually also upgrade that speed in the talent trees. So it's really not like you're sitting there for 5 minutes crafting. So I mean, very much this is me absolutely looking for something to complain about, and then just sort of, you know, highlighting that. But if you were a fan of the first game, if you liked Horizon Zero Dawn, then you'll realize what I say, or, you know, it'll trigger that point where you were like, yeah man, this like having to craft out all of your items in one fight was kind of like irritating, but became less of a problem later when your pouches were good. Now in lieu of that, I do actually also just want to share 2 quick little settings or tips for you in the settings menu of the game. This is one of those short little clips where I remind you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with a buddy, because it really does mean a lot to the channel. But I don't have to do that because you've already done those things. So all I'm gonna do is say, have a fucking great day. That by default aren't on, or that you might have mislooked by just diving straight into the game. But if we go to settings here, you'll see there's the two ones that I want to show or highlight is basically weapon wheel slowdown. Now this means you have some different settings here. You have none, you have normal, which is like a little bit of slowdown. You can almost think of this as bullet time in a way. Then we have slower and we have slowest. I play on slower. This means that the minute you go into your weapon wheel, the entire game slows down and lets you cycle this out. Now, of course, you can be a hardcore bastard and not have this on, and, you know, kind of the pressure's on you more than when you're cycling between your weapons and switching ammo types while, you know, mechs are jumping all over you. But I kind of like the idea of this as like a, almost role playing in a way that, Aloy knows her weapons, and she's kind of like in the middle of combat going like, okay, cool, this mech, you know, takes freeze damage a lot more than any other damage, so let me switch to this thing, and boom, you're back into combat. So that's just like a silly way that I'm role playing it in my head. I definitely don't feel like it makes the combat cheap or anything like that, but that's a setting you might want to check out, especially once you start filling out on all of your hard points, because of course the original game had 4 major hard points. You have more than that now in this game, so you actually can carry quite a bit of different weapons into combat with you. There's of course also different weapon types, so definitely definitely at the beginning of the game you might benefit from having this weapon wheel slowdown. And then the other thing, and the shield wing is, of course, I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but this has been shown in the trailers. It's of course the shield that the Aloy can deploy when she jumps off a high area, and it's kind of like a little parachute thing. It doesn't have a stamina bar or anything like that, so it's literally just a way for you to safely glide down. Now honestly, because this is a new feature in the game, I've done it a couple of times where I've jumped off an area and I've forgotten that I've had this, and I'm like, I fall to my death. I'm like, oh shit, I had the shield wing. So you can have the auto deploy. This by default is off, by the way. So what happens is when you jump, you have to press square and hold it in, and then the shield wing deploys, and then basically you can let go of the button and you sort of glide down. So you can just have this auto deploy on. Now there's pros and cons to this. Of course, sometimes you don't want this. So the sensitivity for when it turns on is basically when the game feels that you're falling far enough to take damage, then it's going to engage the shield wing. So you might need to learn to play around this, because of course sometimes you might jump and you want to actually, you know, get down to the ground as fast as possible, take a little bit of falling damage, but, you know, start running, and then the shield wing can actually slow you down because it auto deploys, and maybe, you know, you get shot or something like that. So that's the pros and cons of the two, but definitely keep an eye out for these two settings. In general, I would tell you to spend some time in the settings of the game. The accessibility settings here are phenomenal, as well as the things that you can strip out of the HUD. If you want an extremely clean HUD with almost nothing, you want to take some great videos, great screenshots, all of that, that's definitely an option. Or if you don't, you know, you want the full guided situation where you have arrows pointing to everywhere that you have to go, that's of course an option as well. But that's it for the video. I'm still very much plugging away at the game, so unfortunately I don't have any build guides, anything like that yet. There's definitely some skills which are standing out in the game and which allow you to perform a lot better against specific enemies, whether you're fighting against humanoids, whether you're fighting against the mechs of the game. But keep an eye on the channel, there's more of that coming. But more importantly, let me know in the comments down below how you're enjoying the game, if you're thinking of picking it up, and what kind of content you would like to see for Horizon Forbidden West. Thank you so much for watching, as usual, especially if you made it this far. It's just very important to me that you have a great morning, a great afternoon, and a goddamn awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.